The colony was quiet, save for the distant hum of Imperial patrols. The boy ran through the dusty streets, his laughter light against the heavy air of oppression. His father, once a warrior, now just a man trying to raise his son in a world that saw humans as lesser. The Galactic Empire had come years ago, enforcing their rule with soldiers and cold efficiency. The humans obeyed, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. The boy didn't understand fear. He saw the world as it should be, not as it was. His father had tried to keep him away from the darkness, away from the cruelty of war. But war had a way of finding those who wished to avoid it. The Imperials arrived in force that day, led by an officer whose arrogance was as strong as his grip on the colony. He barked orders, soldiers moving through the streets like predators. A man, old and frail, was caught in their path. He hadn't bowed fast enough, hadn't moved aside quickly enough. A soldier struck him down, boots crushing ribs as if he were nothing. The boy saw it happen. His small hands clenched into fists. His father had always told him to be careful, to be smart. But at that moment, caution was not in his heart. He picked up a rock and hurled it. A crack echoed as it struck a soldier's helmet. Silence. The officer turned, his cold eyes settling on the boy. There was no hesitation, no warning. A flash of red from his blaster. A single shot. The boy fell. His father was there in an instant, but the moment had already passed. The warmth of life was fading. He held his son's small body, feeling everything inside him fracture into something dark, something permanent. Laughter. The officer laughed. A casual, amused chuckle, as if the act had been nothing more than swatting an insect. "Filthy little pest," he muttered, turning away. The soldiers followed, their boots marching over blood-stained dirt. The father didn't speak, didn't move. The world around him blurred, the sounds of the colony distant. He was no longer just a grieving father. He was something else now. Something the Empire had forgotten humans could be. A predator. He stood, gently laying his son down. His hands no longer trembled with grief. They were steady, calculated. The Imperial officer had just made a fatal mistake. The man they had dismissed as a simple colonist had once been something far worse. A legend on battlefields long forgotten. A name whispered in fear. They had killed his son. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The rifle lay in its case, untouched for years. It was an old weapon, custom-built for a war-long past. He ran his fingers over the metal, remembering the weight of it, the way it had once been an extension of himself. He had sworn he would never use it again. That promise had died with his son. He moved methodically, assembling the rifle with practiced ease. Each click of a component locking into place brought back memories he had buried deep. The long nights spent in the cold, waiting. The slow exhale before a shot. The silence that followed. The Imperials thought they had control. They saw humans as weak, broken creatures beneath their rule. They were wrong. They had forgotten what a single determined human could do. He scouted their movements, slipping through the settlement's outskirts like a ghost. The officer who had murdered his son was confident, moving without fear, surrounded by soldiers who believed themselves untouchable. The sniper watched. He counted their steps, noted their habits, memorized every angle. He did not act out of rage. Rage was reckless. He let it burn cold inside him, fueling his patience. Night fell. He found his position outside the colony, hidden within the ruins of an old watchtower. The wind was still. The scope aligned. He slowed his breathing, letting his pulse steady. The first shot had to be perfect. An Imperial patrol stood guard near the barracks, chatting idly, their weapons slung lazily over their shoulders. They had no reason to be alert. There had never been a threat here before. A single suppressed shot cracked the silence. The officer in the center staggered, then crumpled. The others hesitated, staring in confusion before panic set in. They had no idea where the shot had come from. He moved immediately, shifting locations before they could track him. His years of training took over, instincts honed from battlefields far worse than this. He wasn't just fighting back. He was sending a message. The Imperials scrambled, shouting orders, their discipline faltering. Another shot. A second soldier fell. Then another. The panic turned to fear. By the time they started shooting blindly into the night, he was already gone. Word spread quickly. Whispers among the troops of a phantom in the darkness. Soldiers huddled together in groups, eyes scanning the rooftops, knowing they were being hunted but powerless to stop it. The officer had laughed when he killed a child. He would not be laughing much longer. This was only the beginning. The bodies of dead soldiers were piling up. Each morning, another was found lifeless, a clean hole through the skull, no trace of the killer. The camp was silent now, the arrogance of the Imperials replaced by hushed paranoia. They had tried to deny it at first, blaming deserters, mechanical malfunctions, anything but the truth. But the truth could no longer be ignored. Someone was hunting them. The officer who had once strutted through the colony now flinched at shadows. He barked orders at his men, demanding longer patrols, stricter curfews, harsher punishments for the civilians. None of it mattered. The sniper was never where they expected him to be. They sent scouting teams into the ruins beyond the settlement, desperate to root him out. None returned. A body would be found hours later, slumped against a wall, eyes frozen in terror. They tried luring him into traps, offering false opportunities, setting up fake command posts. He never took the bait. Fear turned to desperation. A new order was given: execute hostages. Make an example of the humans. If the sniper wanted a war, they would give him one. The first executions were scheduled at dawn. 5 civilians dragged into the town square, bound and on their knees. The officer stood before them, his voice strained but loud. "Come out," he called, scanning the rooftops. "Surrender, and they live." No answer. He gestured to a soldier. A blaster fired. A body hit the ground. The second soldier never got the chance to fire again. His head snapped back, a mist of red hanging in the air before his body crumpled. Chaos erupted. Soldiers dove for cover, their formation collapsing. The officer stumbled back, eyes darting wildly. He had seen nothing, heard nothing, until his man was already dead. Another shot. Another soldier fell. The remaining troops fired wildly into the empty buildings, their panic overriding all reason. The officer screamed at them to hold their positions, but they weren't listening anymore. They were done following a dead man. A third shot. The officer turned and ran, abandoning his men, pushing past them in his desperation to escape. The remaining soldiers followed. Discipline was gone. The Empire had taught them strength through fear, but they had never been on the receiving end of it. By the time the dust settled, the hostages were free. The sniper was gone. The officer had lost control. He wasn't just being hunted. He was being dismantled piece by piece. And he knew it. The officer locked himself inside the Imperial Command Center, surrounded by the last of his men. He hadn't slept in days. His hands trembled as he gripped his blaster, flinching at every distant sound. The outpost was fortified, reinforced with energy shields and turrets. He told himself he was safe here. That was a lie. His men whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. They had seen what happened to the others, how the sniper struck without warning, without mercy. They were trapped in this building, waiting for death. Some had already abandoned their posts, slipping into the night, hoping to escape before their turn came. A message had been sent to the Empire. A plea for reinforcements. No response. They were alone. He sat in the dim glow of a holomap, staring at the settlement outside. Empty streets. Silent buildings. The colony had been abandoned by its people, hidden away, waiting. They knew how this would end. A shot rang out. A scream. One of the sentries dropped from the guard tower. A second later, another fell. The officer's breath hitched. It was happening. He barked orders, but no one moved. No one dared step outside. The sniper wasn't picking them off randomly anymore. He was closing in. Another shot. The shields flickered, a power conduit rupturing. The officer's eyes darted to the monitors. He hadn't even considered that the sniper might take out their systems first. Another shot. The outer defenses powered down. The barricades they had trusted were worthless now. The officer grabbed his blaster and backed away from the door. His men were already gone. Silence stretched. He knew the shot was coming. He just didn't know when. Then glass shattered. A single bullet. A perfect shot through the window. The officer's body jerked, his blaster slipping from his fingers as he staggered. He looked down, saw the blood spreading across his uniform. His knees hit the ground. He tried to speak, but there was no air left in his lungs. His body collapsed, eyes staring into nothing. The colony was free. The Empire had lost. And the sniper had vanished, his war over. In the morning, only a grave remained at the edge of the settlement. A simple marker, a tribute to a boy who had dreamed of peace. The sniper's rifle lay beside it, untouched. A symbol. A warning. Humans were not weak. And the next time the Empire forgot that, there would always be another to remind them.